What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's happening with Tesla stock and what tends to happen after earnings come out. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link that's down below. If you sign up and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 25 in total. Deposit $5,000, you're guaranteed 60 free stocks. The offer ends at the end of July. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with Tesla. So, as far as Tesla's going, I just want to say that we tend to see some very interesting volatility because of earnings. And I have some historical data I want to go over that could suggest what Tesla may end up doing. Now, we're going to go over these numbers, right? If you look at the last couple of years for the fiscal quarters, Tesla announces their earnings a little bit after the end of the quarters. And you can see their EPSs. When did they miss? When did they beat? So I actually marked everything for the last couple of years since 2020. And you guys can see a very, very interesting pattern on if Tesla ends up beating or not, and what kind of reaction we get. So, for what we're seeing right here, as far as Tesla's going, you guys can see there's been a big increase in their EPSs overall as Tesla got to profitability. And it's a very, very awesome thing about Tesla and makes it very unique. But despite this, analysts tend to have very, very high expectations. The majority of analysts are still giving Tesla strong buy ratings, and a lot of them are saying to just buy and hold your Tesla stock. Almost none of them are saying to sell, and barely any say it's going to likely underperform. And most analysts are still quite bullish on Tesla. Now, when it comes to their growth, there's some really, really nice growth projections coming out. And if you look at Zacks, for example, they're anticipating that Tesla's going to see an EPS of 40 cents for Q2 and revenue at 22.6 billion. That's still down compared to last year. So will Tesla see a miss or a beat of expectations, and will we see a big change compared to last year? Will it be a significant drop? That depends on a lot of different factors. And whether or not Tesla sees a pump or dump also depends on guidance and what they announce. But let's go over some numbers. So going back to 2020, let's go over the patterns right over here. Basically, this is when Tesla announced their earnings, and when they announced they beat on EPS and revenue was decent, we saw the share price soar in August of 2020. Then if we go to what happened in October, the same thing happened. Good beats, the share price went up. When they missed on EPS in 2021 January, the share price dipped. Same thing happened in April of 2021. Then we saw a rally when they beat, in 2021 throughout the year. Going into 2022, though, they ended up beating on EPS and the share price was kind of flat. It actually went up just a bit, only to sell off a bit more. Don't forget, we had like the global chip shortage and other factors that affected Tesla quite negatively. They still were beating on EPS, but the share price was still underperforming and it was kind of trading sideways in those times. There were times it did run a little bit after earnings, only to continue to fall, which goes to show that sometimes external factors could trump earnings when you have like a chip shortage or factors like that. Zooming forward, we're going to go to what's been happening for the last like 1.5 years. So, right over here, you guys can see this is the more recent data. In 2023, in January, the share price went up after Tesla beat on EPS and revenue. It's also pushing after the deliveries data had come out, so it was very bullish. When we missed on EPS, we came down a little bit only to bounce again. When we beat on EPS and revenue, so it was kind of like an opposite move. We basically pumped approaching this earnings in July. So sometimes Tesla kind of pumps beforehand, and then we start to dip afterwards, even if we end up beating. So sometimes it's like buy the rumor, sell the news. Then they missed on EPS in October 2023. We saw the share price dip a little bit, only to get bought back up. Same thing happened in January of 2024. They missed on EPS. The share price came down a bit and continued to respect a downtrend. They met expectations in April. The share price bounced a bit for a couple of weeks. They missed. The share price came down for a couple of weeks before it started to bounce again. They beat in October of 2024. The share price rallied like crazy. Then they ended up beating in a very, very narrow margin in January. But keep in mind, their sales were down a little bit. And I think that's incentivized some selling. That's why we saw the share price dip. And during the last earnings, Tesla ended up beating a lot of expectations. And that's why the share price came back. I'm sorry, they missed some expectations, but the share price bounced because of a lot of growth about the robotaxi. A lot of talk about AI really helped the share price, and the news about the robotaxi launch is what really helped the share price to really offset that. So what this data tells us is that when Tesla has earnings next week, Either we're going to see a big beat on everything and Tesla does very well and surprises investors. Typically, when we beat on earnings, the share price, it's mixed. Sometimes it kind of like pumps beforehand and then dumps. Sometimes it just continues to rally. In this case, if we rally really hard approaching earnings, we're going to see if this is like a buy the rumor, sell the news event. If we rally beforehand and they do very, very well, but when you look at the red lines, what typically happens when you have a red line is most of the time we do sell off a little bit when we missed on earnings. The only exception was like last earnings because Tesla had the robotaxi hype. But typically when you miss, we dump. Typically we do sell off. So if Tesla misses on EPS and earnings, okay, just hypothetically, there's more than a 60% chance that this will sell off a bit, especially if we pump approaching earnings. We might see a small sell off in case that ends up happening if they don't do too well. So that's what that's basically suggesting. If we don't do well with earnings, if we miss expectations, we get like this red reaction. We're going to be favoring the downside move. If we do well with earnings, it's also very, very nuanced. We could rally, we may not. If we rally really hard approaching earnings, what typically happens is we do sell off a bit after earnings come out because of buy the rumors, sell the news. But it also depends on external factors. And that's the thing about Tesla. Profitability and margins are not going to be everything. What's going to matter is their guidance. What does Elon Musk tell us about their future sales? What happens with Tesla's overall revenue streams? What's going to happen with the robotaxi? If earnings are not that great, but they pump the robotaxi saying it's going to be very good, that could still help Tesla bounce a little bit. So it all depends on all these different factors. So anything could happen during earnings, but we are favoring that we're going to rally approaching them. And typically, when you rally approaching earnings, you do sell off afterwards. That's what tends to happen on the charts. Like many examples are like right here, we kind of rallied approaching earnings and sold off. Here, we kind of rallied a bit and then we sold off a bit before continuing to run. Right here, we basically rallied and then we sold off, even though we did well with earnings. So, my point is typically when you rally really hard approaching earnings, you do sell off a bit afterwards. That's what historically happens. But that also depends on, do we get some hype with the robotaxi? Do we get some hype with all of Tesla's products like Optimus? Does that cause the share price to bounce hard? We're going to have to see about that. So the honest thing I could tell you is that anything could happen with Tesla's earnings. I can't really predict how this is going to go. If Tesla beats, there's a possibility we kind of pump approaching earnings and dump. If Tesla misses, then the odds will favor us dipping. That's what typically happens. And then it also depends on what announcements come out. So it's really hard for me to predict exactly what's going to happen. There's so many ifs and buts and external factors that are pulling the strings. That's why the main point of this video is to tell you that you have to be very careful with earnings. Sometimes companies could beat on expectations and still sell off. Sometimes companies end up beating or they miss expectations and they still rally really hard, which is what happened to Tesla during the last earnings right here, because we already dumped so much approaching it. So it all depends. So we could go either way. It depends on their guidance. It depends on what Tesla announces with their sales. It depends on Elon Musk and his politics, what is said about all of this, and etc. Will Tesla rally and up? I don't truly know. I'm open to anything, and that's why you want to be very careful in trying to trade Tesla's earnings, because anything could happen. It could sell off really hard. It could rally really hard. We don't truly know. So be careful with Tesla's earnings. I think that's the most important thing. Sometimes they'll miss, the share price still goes up. Sometimes they beat on earnings, the share price goes down. It could go either way. I do believe that their earnings are going to be somewhat lower than what we saw in previous earnings reports because of the decrease in their sales. But if Elon Musk hypes up the robotaxi, he says they're going to expand to all these different areas. If he starts hyping all that up, he starts talking about Optimus, the share price could still run. So really, anything could happen, guys. That's why you have to be very, very careful. I just wanted to show you guys evidence of the claim. I can't just be like, oh, anything could happen with earnings and blah, 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 without showing you guys any evidence. So I wanted to show you guys evidence of that, how if you just look at this chart, sometimes they pump approaching good earnings, then they dump after they come out. Sometimes we continue to fall after bad earnings. Typically, when we get bad earnings, we do dip. That's what typically happens. Sometimes we just run after earnings come out, or we dump after good earnings come out. Like right here, we had good earnings and we just dipped afterwards. So it could go either way. Honestly, it could go either way. So you guys have the evidence in front of you now, so you know to be very careful with Tesla. I'm not too sure about what their margins will look like. I think that's going to be very key. And I just wish them nothing but the best when it comes to earnings. I think we might rally a bit approaching it, and hopefully we try to rally more if we get really good earnings and there's a lot of hype with Optimus. Hopefully it just continues to run. But you never know, guys. You want to be very open-minded, at least nonetheless. So keep that in mind. We'll see if we get a rejection or not. So that's why you want to be very careful. So what's the point of this video? The answer is to just show you guys that based off historical data, the share price sometimes runs after good earnings, sometimes it dips after good earnings, sometimes it's the opposite. They don't do too well and we see a big rally afterwards. Typically, when we don't do well, the share price does dip, though. That's what typically happens. So, if Tesla doesn't do well, then yeah, the odds do favor the downside move, but we'll see just to be safe. So, with that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Hopefully, this video was insightful. And I just want to warn you guys that anything could happen depending on what Elon Musk says about all these products and his time at Tesla. And we're going to be very, very patient with this one. I wish Tesla nothing but the best. And let's see how these earnings go next week. It's going to be very key for how they end up moving. So, that being said, make sure you watch your levels just in case, and just to be very, very blunt, when you zoom into Tesla like this and go to like the 4 hour time frame, if Tesla starts failing at that 320 area, as we have this channel that's trying to develop like this, so if we continue to uptrend like this, right, we start to see higher highs and higher lows after earnings come out. This may continue to uptrend like this. The bullish case is that this may continue to run at least approaching these earnings, just like this, as we continue to squeeze, looking for 335. But if we end up dumping, we lose 315. There's going to be a risk of us dumping towards the low 300s all over again. And if we keep breaking 335, we could continue to squeeze for like 350. So it could go either way. We're going to see if this is a flag and if Tesla kind of rallies and then dumps like this. It all depends on if this is a flag. What is this going to be? It all depends. We'll have to wait and see. So be prepared for some volatility when earnings comes out. If Tesla misses, then the odds do favor downside. It's a little bit more probable. And if we do really well, anything could happen depending on external announcements. So we'll see. Make sure you watch your levels and you're very careful. Just know right now Tesla's bullish approaching earnings, and I wish them nothing but the best. I thank you for listening. Have a good one, guys, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you for listening, and peace out.